Thank you, Tamara, for a very powerful and warm introduction to this panel. Before I introduce my panelist, I want to share a small story with you. Picture this. A 52-year-old woman walks into an emergency room. She is complaining of nausea, radiating pain in her jaw, and unusual fatigue. The attending physician runs her symptoms through an AI-powered tool that has been designed to diagnose early detection of cardiovascular risk. The system tells that there is no risk or she's a low-risk patient. She's sent back home and advised to take rest, manage her stress levels. 3 days later, she's back in the ER, this time in an ambulance, and experiencing a heart attack. The AI-based system completely misdiagnosed her symptoms because it was built on a data set that was predominantly male subjects. It missed her symptoms completely. The technology was great. The intentions were good. However, the outcome was devastating because empathy was missing. But here's where the story shifts. Women technologists and researchers saw this as a pattern, and they refused to accept the inevitable. They asked questions. Whose symptoms are we building for? Who is represented in that data? Who are we building for when that person is not in the room? When technology is guided by leaders who combine technical excellence along with deep empathy, the result is we just don't innovate. We transform for what's possible for humanity. Let's talk about how we will rewrite the code and build a future with AI that's inclusive, intentional, and truly empowering for all. With that story, I want to welcome our panelists here. Please join me in welcoming Kavita Prabhakar, US AI and Engineering Leader at Deloitte. Kavita co-leads Executive Women in Technology Initiative for Deloitte's CIO program. She serves on the board of Girls Who Code. Kavita has been recognized as one of the Fortune Most Powerful Women Next Gen and as Crane's Notable Minorities in Accounting, Consulting, and Law. Thank you, Kavita. My next panelist here is Mackenzie Herzog, Vice President, NFL, responsible for player health, safety, and strategic innovation. Mackenzie is an experienced sports injury and orthopedic epidemiologist and a PhD in injury epidemiology. Thank you, Mackenzie, for joining us. And our very own Shally Stanley, Vice President, AWS Professional Services for North America, responsible for helping customers realize their desired outcomes within the AWS cloud. Shally's professional journey centers around building large global teams for professional services. She has been recognized as a top female leader in consulting. So one of my favorite Amazon leadership principles is think big. So I want to start with thinking big. I want to ask all of you, starting with you, Shally. If you had a magic wand, what is one systemic barrier that you think AI truly has an opportunity to eliminate?
You know, one of the things that I was raised with, Sonu, is education is one of the most powerful enablers for anyone's future, and it has generational, multi-generational impact. And so I would focus on education. And one of the things that really excites me about AI is access. It's access to knowledge, access to instruction. It's available through the internet, of course, but across language barriers. And I think that's incredibly important. We can take very sophisticated content and make it understandable for different age groups, different geographies, different cultures, different places. And so for me, we have this ability to bring a tremendous educational system to the world.
Amazing. Great with that. Kavita, you have a point of view.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here at AWS reInvent every year. Definitely the most current topics are discussed here. And for the lady who talked about wanting to come here to see women in tech and women in cloud, trust me, it is super important that you stay the course, because I'm on the board of Girls Who Code, and there's so many young women looking to people like you who are absolutely willing to trailblaze the path. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here, and recognize you're doing it for others, like you're looking to this panel to do it for you. So definitely wanted to open with that. The second thing I'll say is, when we talk about think big, I think it's so interesting. My son wanted to solve teleportation because I was a traveling mom and he wanted me home very quickly. I don't think AI is going to quite do that. But if there's one thing from a systemic barrier perspective that I'll talk about, it's probably in financial literacy. And what I'll tell you is, my grandfather used to tell me, let your money work for you when you sleep. And when I think about the concept of financial literacy and the ability to reach people of different economic stratas with financial planning, financial education, it is a great thing, I believe, AI can do for our future. It can reach, like you said, language barriers, different user styles, different risk appetites, very similar to the education point you made. But financial literacy, I think, is super important for everyone to reach a lifestyle that's better than today, potentially. And equalizing that, I think, can be pretty huge for us. So that's something that I think about when I think about the future and the equity in the system.
Yeah, I think, echoing what Kavitha said, all of you being here today is so important because each of you will have your own perspective, and that will help us grow just in the same way that all three of us are going to have our own perspectives. For me, I think when I think big, I think about healthcare. And I think about access to healthcare in particular. I grew up in a rural town in Wisconsin, and access to healthcare was very challenging. We just didn't have access to good hospital systems and doctors close by. And I grew up in a family where we have rare diseases, myself included, and so getting access to healthcare when you had something that was rare was infinitely more challenging. And that happens everywhere in the United States. And so for me, where I think AI can really break barriers is by helping folks who need help access the right healthcare resources that they need. And also, I think there's this huge opportunity for pattern recognition for rare disease detection that can help the 300 million people worldwide who are living with rare diseases that may not even know that that's what they're struggling with. And so I think there's this huge opportunity for AI to really impact how we access healthcare. And I think that comes from a personal place for me, that I grew up in that situation and that impacted me. But that's why it's so important that each of you are here, because you each will have your own story that will then be infused into the work that you're doing that helps us have an impact more broadly in all these different areas.
Thank you. And that's very bold and very promising. But I know that technology doesn't solve by itself. It needs intentionality. In your own personal journey, what has been that oh no moment for you where you saw an AI bias, where you felt that this was not really built for keeping me in mind? Shai, do you want to share your point of view?
I think there's going to be so many that are what I would call medium to small examples for me. I think I'm left-handed, and the whole world was not built for left-handers either, so I have this recognition of it's just an unconscious bias, and you live with it. I think we run across that with AI in so many places. You called out some in healthcare, we see it in education, we see it anytime you call out images that AI creates, right? It shows up in lots of places. We know why. Because of the data sets, the history, we know why it's there. For me, it's just a really good reminder to be intentional and to remind AI to check for all of those biases with intentionality and improve the outcomes that we get. So when I think about the reality, Sonu, it's being mindful of the unintentional biases and thinking, like every time you see one, make note, because we can improve the outcomes for the future if we make notes along the way and provide AI with that right instruction. We have an opportunity to accelerate the correction of bias, but everyone brings a different perspective to it. At Amazon, we always have a leave an empty chair for our customer mentality. What would your customer say if they were in the room? If we extend that a little bit and think about that intentionality around bias, and everybody contributes, we have an opportunity, like I said, to really correct for some of that bias in a way that we probably couldn't have without AI.
Kavita, do you want to build on that?
I think you hit on all the key points there. It's interesting, we are also in the same moment when we think of oh no moments, encouraging experimentation, right? We want experimentation. We want fast failure. If you do, how do you then say, how do we handle oh no moments? Because we will have them. We will absolutely have them. But we have to keep on the path of experimentation and keep it in controlled environments as much as possible to test, to fail, to learn, to address intentional and unintentional biases, and to repeat. And I think the culture of experimentation and fast failure is going to be extremely important in this day and age. So I have quite a few oh no moments. We did a marketing solution that focused on customer personas and full digital campaigns. And we were so eager to release it for one of our clients because speed was, the name of the game. Speed became the name of the game. So we did release it only to recognize that the data set was very focused on one ethnic group and didn't speak to almost 65% of the client base or the customer base of that particular organization. Now, what happened? Yes, it was an oh no moment, but with testing, we quickly realized that that didn't work, and we applied the techniques of really changing the base set of data. So I think the question that comes up is speed has become a huge part of the pressure in the system. How do you then say, okay, do I really understand my cost of error? Do I assess my cost of error? Do I convince my board of my cost of error and recognize that making errors is going to be part of the culture, and how do we catch it fast enough to address it in the system?
Yeah, I think for me, my oh no moment was actually more of an aha moment, and it was understanding how much responsibility I had as a programmer back in the day when I was pursuing my PhD. I was working with a lab on building a predictive model to try to help identify patients who might be at risk of getting progressive osteoarthritis in their knee. So they might be progressing in their arthritis journey with their knee, and there was a new therapy on the market that we could offer to patients if we knew who to identify. If we could identify those patients ahead of time, could we find a way to get them that treatment earlier? And for me, what I realized was I was the analyst on this project, and we built a large predictive model, and we were really excited. We actually found a predictor that identified who is likely to get progressive osteoarthritis, and it was fairly easy. It was that we saw that people who reduced their walking speed year over year, that sometimes was an indicator that they had progressive arthritis before they got an x-ray or before they had symptoms. And so we found this finding with the data and thought, great, this is something that we can implement in a clinic. You can imagine going in for your annual physical and doing a walking speed test, and if you start to reduce your walking speed, maybe they send you for further treatment. But what I really realized, and why it was such an aha moment for me, was that I built the model and I knew the methods that I used and I knew how to build a predictive model, but I also knew it wasn't a causal model. And that was so important that my audience might not understand the methods I use. And now my example of that you reduce walking speed is probably pretty logical. You understand that it's a predictor, a signal of something else going on in your body. It's not something that caused the osteoarthritis, but you can imagine the logical fallacy that people go through all the time where they say, oh, how about just speed up your walking speed and then you won't get arthritis? That doesn't make any sense, right? But that is on me as the analyst, as the person writing the code and designing the study to understand how the results can be interpreted and how they can be applied. And I think that for me was not so much an oh no moment, although a little bit, more of an aha moment that we have such a responsibility as the ones that are implementing these methods to make sure that we understand exactly how they can be interpreted. And so to the points that have been made, there are always going to be gaps in data sets, and they're not necessarily going to be completely representative, but we have to be able to understand those limitations and interpret things that make sense of that for the user of whatever we're building. And so for me, I think that was the aha moment, was that I realized that it is a responsibility of those who are building the code, who are creating the methods, to make sure that these products are used in the way that they're intended, and that there is a risk there of misuse if we take that responsibility lightly. And so I think that is both a huge responsibility and really exciting, because now all of us who are in this room that have these different perspectives can use that responsibility to make sure that we're creating things that are applied in the way that is intended to help better, not just health, but lots of areas.
That's a great story, Mackenzie, and thank you for sharing that. You clearly had empathy when you were building that solution, right? And you touched upon something about the data, right? And this, Kavita, this is my question to you, because you work a lot with customers and with data. We know that generative AI system learns from the data, and the data from the world that it has been versus not necessarily the world that it should be, right? When you're working with solutions with your customers, how are you thinking about this data gap? How are you thinking about representation?
So I think it's a really tough question, and you answered part of it too. You touched on it, which is, we get into the mode of saying, what is the data telling us, right? It's based a lot on what it is today versus what it should be, perhaps. And that's the nuance, I think, that gets hard to understand and measure, because there is no perfect state that you could say, okay, this is the destination state that has the right level of representation, that has the right level of thinking for left-handed people and right-handed people, right, Shelley? So it is hard to get to that perfect data set, but I think the key here is to continue to understand. Awareness is what I will tell you is what we focus a lot on when we're working with our customers and clients. What is your awareness of the patterns that exist in the data that you're using? What is it that is overrepresented or perhaps underrepresented, right? Both are things you'll have to keep a close eye on and a close understanding of. If there are overrepresented voices, how is it impacting your design? How is it impacting your thinking? If there's underrepresented voices, how are you going to bring those voices to the table such that they are not, we're just not rewriting algorithms, but we're rewriting the tables at which these algorithms are written, right? So those are the big things I would say that we are consistently pushing on. But that also doesn't take away from the basics, right? You do need good data. You do need high quality information. You do need the ability to constantly keep it up to date. You need customer insights, constantly refreshing what it is that you are perceiving to be the problem sets you're going to address. All of those, I think, are super important, and those basics cannot be lost. I think there was probably a phase where data readiness for AI was getting dismissed as not important, I do believe it's back in the conversation, because we're learning that without focusing on data readiness for AI, you're not able to build solutions that are truly scalable for the variety of customers you do serve.
Great. Shali, I want to talk about intentional design. AWS is a leader in AI. Can you tell us a little bit about our responsible AI practices? And as a leader in AI, how are we building bias detection capabilities in our solutions?
The AI suite, and I say suite because it's really a number of different products, and it's a number of different mindsets that you bring to bear. So there's parts that are technology. The bedrock suite of services is very, very powerful as technology goes. When we think about responsible AI, we think about observability, right? We want to know how decisions are made. We want explainability so we can follow the reasoning and determine whether it's accurate or suspect, right? We have hallucination guardrails that we put in place. We have bias detection guardrails that we put in place. We have information security that we build into the solution. There's so many things that are there, but we have to use them. And using them properly is a journey, because as we were saying, we discover something and we have to update it. We'll keep watching, and then we'll learn something new, and we keep updating it. Now, the technology gets smarter, and it can start to update itself with permissions and allow you to do that, right? And so this rapidly evolving journey that we're all on to provide safe AI is great. And there are bad actors in the world. We all know that there are bad actors in the world. And so this is the ongoing back and forth and tension that we all have to be super mindful of. I think someone and in the beginning said, I'm worried about our critical thinking capabilities. It really reminds me, when I think about the importance of this journey and the constant updating and learning, I think it requires humans to be on their toes, actually. Because all of the things that we see as suspect are probably the ones that humans will recognize as suspect or not right. And that is a tremendous amount of critical thinking. I think the things that are less tricky, the technology will take care of. It reminds me of maps. Map software did not exist when I was learning to drive. I had this atlas stuffed in my door of the car, and I was not a good map reader. And I certainly was not a good map reader while I was lost, right? And I'm very thankful for map software. It is a savior for me to get from place A to place B. But maybe that critical skill of map reading isn't the thing that is focused on critical thinking. I think different skills come and go, but that need for us to be responsible with AI and check it along the way, I don't think that goes away. I think it evolves, and the things that are tricky stays at the top.
Great, yeah, absolutely. Kenzie, I think everybody wants to know, what are you driving as innovation, specifically at NFL? What opportunities exist between data and empathy to support well-being of athlete more holistically? Can you share something with us?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to be in player health and safety at the NFL. We have we've been on a decade-long, more than decade-long journey on player health and safety to really collect and gather data that can help us understand the athlete's experience in order to reduce injuries and improve their player health. And now we're at this point where we have all of these different data sources. We're very fortunate in sports. They collect a ton of data on things like how the players act on field and what their outcomes are in games. And we collect a lot of data on player health through an electronic medical record. And so we're at this point now, starting in 2019, we've been partnering with AWS on the Digital Athlete, which is an AI-backed platform where we synchronize all of those data sources together. So the goal is to really understand the 360-degree view of what an athlete experiences on field through data. It's essentially like a virtual laboratory that we can test different opportunities to reduce injuries and to improve player health using data. And that is an incredibly exciting point to be at. We now have the opportunity to have the data synchronized. And so now what do we do with that data? How do we actually action it? And so I think that is the key, is understanding the player holistically. How can we stitch all of these data sources together so that we see not just a silo of here's what they did in a game or here's what they did in practice, but how can we put that all together and not only see their experience on field, but also their past medical history and what they're experiencing in life, and put that together to figure out how can we then harness the data to be able to identify injury reduction opportunities. And so for me, I'm so excited to be at the NFL in player health and safety right now, because I think we've already had so many wins in terms of having the fewest concussions on record last season. We've changed the kickoff, and it's the first player health and safety backed rule change. We have incredible innovations in equipment with helmets. And we've had so many successes already, but now we're at this point where we have the data synchronized together and we can do even more. And so I'm excited to get to the place where we are now looking at an individual level on how can we use the data to guide player-specific injury reduction initiatives, and how can we give the data back to our practitioners who are on the field, who know these athletes better than I do as sitting at a computer at the NFL, but they know these players. How can we give the data back to them in a way that they can make smart decisions about how to improve their players' health? And so it's really a great time to be at the NFL, and it's been a really exciting opportunity to be able to use data and to use some of this technology to improve the player's experience.
Can I ask Mackenzie a question? That's fascinating to me. So, do players ever reject the data?
No, it's interesting. So we have a very data-driven league, and I think it's come from a number of years of gaining trust and sort of talking about empathy, is really understanding the users and how they want to receive the data. And so it's true that sometimes you get pushback. I remember when we implemented the Guardian cap. I don't know how many football fans we have in the room, but we have a Guardian cap that goes over a helmet in practice, and we implemented the Guardian cap and asked players to wear it in practice because the Guardian cap reduced head impact forces by about 10% if you were wearing the Guardian cap, and 20% if you and the person that you collided with were wearing the Guardian cap. We asked players to wear this, and the first season we had it out there, I remember a player saying, "It can't fit through the door, it's way too big on my head." And so you have to understand their perspective and really show them the data and advocate for why does that matter. And so I think it comes back to this empathy piece of our players are very data-driven now. They will actually sit and look at the evidence, and they'll say, okay, I understand it's a 20% reduction in magnitude. I'm more likely to use that data and to adopt it. But it's also hearing them out, hearing coaches out, and understanding what are they looking for from the data and what are their perspectives, and sharing the results in a way that really makes sense for them. So from a player perspective, from a coach perspective, from competition committee, from our league executives, we've had a ton of buy-in, but it's because we've gone through more than a decade now of really hearing them and showing them the evidence that exists, and it being a two-way street that we're able to share that data and ultimately have these successes with injury reduction.
What you said there, the whole concept of trust, I think is huge, because you've built the trust in small bits over time. And I think that's huge in anything we do, right? In the solutions we develop. I think the trustworthy AI focus is super important. By the way, it doesn't have to be AI. Like whatever tech we build, whatever solutions we build, I love the way you said, it's an adoption journey. And you have to stay patient with it, hear why it works, why it doesn't, and keep building on it. That's a great story, Mackenzie.
Yeah. We're very focused on the implementation piece.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, our data and our research is only good enough if we can implement it and if we can gain the buy-in from the end users to actually action what we're finding. And so we've focused as much, if not more, on that translation piece. How do we explain what we're seeing? How do we really make it land with the right audience?
So you said something very, very impactful there, right? Technology can be great, but if it's not intentional, it's really of no use, right? So we touched upon biases in data, we touched upon empathy a little bit, but let's dig in a little bit more on this, right? There's a general myth that if you have to be a great builder, you need more logical skills. We don't really talk about empathy. We don't talk about emotional intelligence, right? In the space of technology, how do you really define emotional intelligence? What does it really mean? And why is it becoming important or relevant today? And someone spoke about critical thinking. Why is this important in the AI revolution? Do you want to share your thoughts, Kavita?
I'll start. So this is interesting discussion, right? I think the part that we haven't discussed much in the AI revolution is this word accountability. And I think about accountability a lot because we are continuing to automate. We're continuing to really use technology to increase speed to market. But there's a lot of democratization of technology. In an age like that, I believe the value of human potential just went up. And what I mean by the word accountability in this setup is, I think we haven't thought through where does accountability lie. As we continue to detach more and more from things being built, products being built, where does the accountability lie? And the reason accountability matters is because end of the day, it's going to be extremely critical to have empathy, judgment, accountability as core skills that support all this automation that's coming, all this technology that's coming, in my opinion. I believe it's super, super critical. And the critical thinking that the gentleman talked about is extremely important as you think about new systems of governance, new systems of really understanding what is happening, who's accountable for the outcomes, that potentially a probabilistic technology versus a deterministic technology put out there. So in my mind, we have to keep pushing on what are those governing structures, what are the human skills. The human edge is the competitive edge, right? What are those human skills that are going to stand out tomorrow that will drive and sustain a very well-governed new technology system that is getting built today?
Shali, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think we're at a very interesting time. If we go back a few hundred years and we think about the amount of change humans went through in their lifetime, it actually wasn't that much. When we think about the amount of change that we as humans have experienced over the last even just 50 years. I mean, if you take the whole last century, it's tremendous. 100 years ago, 1925, imagine what life was like versus in 2025. The pace of change that humans lived through is unprecedented. And I think our ability to absorb that change, right, is harder and harder. And so we we go through, and what I call, we skim. We skim. We get the essence of it, and we move on. You said it already. Speed is the new currency, right? With AI, speed matters. Speed matters more sometimes than money. And so our ability to keep up with that change is harder too. And we need assists or assistants to be able to do that. So I think it's a little bit of a necessary that AI is there to help us to keep pace with that change, or new technology is there because it's a cycle. It feeds each other, right? One of the things that I think about around emotional intelligence is, what do we need help with? And what is innately human? As humans, we are emotional beings, not purely logical beings. We lead with emotions, right? And anybody that's, truly in tune with strong leadership knows to appeal to the emotional side versus the logical side. I have yet to see emotional technology. And so when I think of emotional intelligence, I think it really is thinking about the people and the role that technology plays to assist us along the way, and how we navigate that, and where we need the most help from humans to stay human. And I think that that's not going to go away. At least I can't imagine it yet.
I hope not. Yes. So the most innovative teams share one common theme, which is psychological safety, right? The belief that it's safe to take risk, admit mistakes, fail, and start over, especially when you talk about speed, right? What approaches do you take as a leader to foster emotional intelligence within your team? Kenzie, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I think this concept is so important. And in my previous role, I led a team of about 30 scientists, and they were about 90% women. And this concept of taking risks and being afraid to fail is really challenging. It's really challenging to develop that psychological safety on the team, but it's so important. And I think for me, a couple of things that we did to really try to develop a psychologically safe environment where we can innovate without being afraid of taking those risks and failing, or of making a mistake along the way, was, one, we talked about it a lot. We talked about it on the team, about how scary it can be to make a mistake and how scary it can be to fail. And we normalized it. Once you realize that everyone else in the room feels the same way, that they're afraid to admit that they had a bug in their code that they didn't notice, or that they're afraid that they tried this new software and it turned out to not work the way that we thought it would. Once you realize that everyone else kind of feels the same way, it gets a little bit easier to take those risks. We talked a lot about what did we learn along the way and how did it make us better. But I think my favorite tactic with my team was reframing the whole experience and talking to my team about how all of these experiences are ultimately developing them into leaders. So even the worst experiences that they had, where they made a big mistake and maybe the person they told it to didn't react the way that they wanted, what can you learn about how you would have reacted as a leader? How can you reframe the experience as something that was not a bump along the way, but in fact necessary in your growth of however you want to grow as an employee? And so that, to me, was my favorite way of kind of normalizing these experiences. We all go through them. We're not going to get to the places that we are without going through bumps along the way. And that does mean that you have to be a little bit brave and not afraid to fail, and not take those failures so seriously, I guess, and sort of be able to reframe them and learn from them. And so that, for me, was sort of the way with a team, particularly of younger women scientists, to kind of get them to feel brave enough to innovate and to make those changes, because at the end of the day, that's really what made us great. That was why our team excelled and was able to break barriers in terms of injury reduction, was able to break barriers in terms of being women working in a sports environment. It was because we took those steps and we kind of got over that fear of making the mistake.
Shali, would like your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I love that. It's embrace. embrace that. For me, for psychological safety, I think there's a couple of parts. One is, as a leader, being willing to listen is so important. Listen and ask good questions. I have found that the people I work with, truly amazing people, but boy, are we hard on ourselves, like really hard on ourselves. And so when you have a situation, when you're your own worst critic, and someone tells you, but I would never do that. I would never judge you the way you're judging you. Like, it's eye-opening. Oh, I wouldn't, do that to anybody else either, right? And people are allowed to make mistakes and learn from it. And sometimes just having that conversation to say it's okay, and as a leader, role modeling that as well, to share vulnerabilities and mistakes and being brave to say, I have no idea if this is going to work. Let's try it. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. Like, I think there's a mindset that goes with it. But to me, listening, talking about it, and creating the opportunity, and just reminding ourselves that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay.
Yeah, I think that's so important too. I come from an environment where my leaders said it was okay to try and fail and try something new again.
Absolutely. I was going to add, I think the only thing that both of you didn't say was vulnerability. I find vulnerability is a key aspect, which you touched on here at the end, to psychological safety and trust building. When you're able to, as a leader, really say what you know or don't know, or what you're struggling with, it creates such a coverage of distance. If somebody's a mile apart, they just came half a mile closer to you or 500 feet closer to you because of your vulnerability. And the second thing that I would tell you for psychological safety, I think, is communication and transparency. I think transparency matters a lot. The ability to continuously talk about what we're trying to achieve, what we faced as a team in terms of small challenges or roadblocks, how we overcame that. Change in direction sometimes is an important aspect of transparency. And it is, I think, so important to be transparent with your teams. To me, these aspects of psychological safety really help bond teams. And the last thing is fun with purpose. I call it fun with purpose. Have some fun, right? Life is just too serious. We are just too serious. And our ability to have some fun with purpose, I think, is a massively great equalizer in bringing people together and moving towards the mission at hand versus trying to just show your individual skill at hand.
Thank you. We are almost at the end of our session, and I have a couple of questions that I'd like to go over. I want to ask you a personal question. Why does this really matter to you personally? What has made you believe that artificial intelligence can only be successful when it's combined with emotional intelligence? Shali, would love your inputs.
I shared a little bit about how I think that we've got assists with AI, and it reminds us about the parts of us that are human and the support that we need to keep going. So for me, they go hand in hand. I don't separate them as two separate things. I think they're deeply intertwined, and as humans, we need assists, and AI cannot function properly without humans, whether that's all the guardrails and building in the biases and all of the things that we need to do to keep it responsible. I really do see it as a joint thing. Why it's important to me is I feel like we have a role to play, right? As someone who really does believe deeply in people and how I work with others. I feel like as a technologist, I have a role to play to bring those two perspectives together. I think it's very easy to say, I'm going to ignore AI or technology. You can do that. I don't think it's going to work very well, but you can try, right? Or you can be all about the technology and forget the human, but I don't think that's going to work very well either. And for those of us that can navigate the course and help others navigate it as well, I feel it's accountability, responsibility. It's something that I take seriously.
Kavita, would you want to build on that?
It's a hard question, actually, Sonu. You know, it is so intrinsically what I believe in. First of all, I think one part of the conversation that has become hard in society today is AI is being seen as this thing. It has a shape, it has a form, it is outside of us. Fundamentally, any tech is designed to make our lives better, and we are designing it to make our lives better. So I do think there's something in the conversation where the power equation is off. And I really think about it that way. Like, what is giving the narrative of AI that much power? Clearly, it's highly, highly new tech, significant advances. You said, amazing what it can do for healthcare, for education. It is absolutely, the vision is brilliant. But we as humans will always be at the center of this. And we will lead, we will drive, we will absolutely define how it brings better lives to all of us. That's really how I see this. And I do think that'll matter a lot, that perspective, and that opinion will matter a lot as we continue to move down this path.
Yeah, I think that idea of bringing better lives to all of us is really why it matters to me. I shared at the beginning that where I think there's an opportunity is with rare disease, because I have a rare disease. I have a connective tissue disorder. That's why I got into sports injury prevention, because as a teenager, I had a number of injuries, and I realized that these injuries they're not life-threatening, but they impact your quality of life so much. And so that really gave me this drive to get into this field, to figure out how can I help reduce injuries for other people? How can I keep people physically active? And so for me, it's a very personal journey, but I think where AI and tech comes into this is it allows us to make an impact, an even larger impact, even faster by having that core drive, that real personal mission of what we want to accomplish. And what I think is so interesting is, for me, I'm motivated to improve life by improving healthcare and by reducing musculoskeletal injuries. But every single person in this room, I bet you have your own why. And that is infused into the work that you're doing. And collectively, that means that we can transform the lives of those around us in so many positive ways. And AI and technology just helps accelerate that even faster.
Thank you for sharing that. My one last question for this audience that you could share. We spoke about so many things today. If there is one thing that you'd want everybody in this room to take away, we have a mix of individual contributors, technologists, managers. What can they take away to build a more equitable AI for tomorrow? Mackenzie.
I think it is that why. I think it is so easy to think about the how and the what and the day-to-day of what do I need to get done today, but really thinking about the why of what am I trying to accomplish, and having intention in what we're doing, and also processing information. We talked about critical thinking. I think that is so important and is going to continue to be so important in everything we do. The critical thinking piece of what we do, I think we can take that to everything that we do this week, and everything that we do in our work and everything that we do in our lives is really take a moment to think about the why and to infuse your own personal experience into it, because that's ultimately what's going to make our work more inclusive, is by infusing our own perspective into it.
I think you said it really well. I can say really, really well. I will add a couple of things. You know, Andrew Maslow has a quote, which I'm a lover for quotes. At every given moment, you have two choices: to step back into safety or to step forward into growth. And I invite all of you to step forward into growth, because it is an incredible moment for us as leaders, as technologists, to really think about the future, and think about how to make lives better, lives more equitable, lives more inclusive, right? And systems more inclusive. And you have the ability to define what that growth looks like for tomorrow.
I'm just going to build on two amazing responses and bring it back full circle, Sonu, to how you opened the conversation, and that was think big. I think if we think big, we can accomplish amazing things, and if we think small, we'll accomplish small things. Mm-hmm. And so it's our imagination that limits what's possible. So think big.
Thank you. So we come to our wrap-up. We started with our story of a woman in ER who was invisible to AI because it was not built by keeping her in mind. Today, we end our session with a vision for a future for AI, where AI just does not see her, it serves her. Technology, we learned today, truly has the power to dismantle the biases of the past. And women today, you can see from our panelists here, they are just not the participants in this AI revolution. We are architecting the future of AI, building it with intentionality, inclusivity for a more equitable future. The question is not whether AI is going to change our future. It will. The question we need to ask, who gets to shape AI? With that, I'm going to leave you all with this deep thought with our three panelists, and thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming here, sharing your experiences and learnings with all of us. Thank you.